So we're on the verge of what I think, and this is one of the few things that people agree on in this campaign, is the most important day left, which is next Wednesday, the first debate. I mean, this probably is make it or break it for Mitt Romney, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Mitt Romney is looking for some way to change the dynamic of the race and, for the first time in a few weeks, change it in his favor, as opposed to these developments that have really churned things up quite a lot, but always to his disadvantage. One thing that he might have on his side, if history is a guide, is in past presidential debates, usually the first one, when it's against an incumbent, cuts in favor of the challenger. And
that's just because they get put up on the same level for the first time, right? Isn't that really what that's about?
Yeah, I mean, you got to look presidential when you're up debating a president.
A president, yeah.
And Romney has had a lot of experience. I believe he's had more experience doing presidential debates than any other presidential candidate, because he's run for president twice, and this year, as we remember during the primary debate, we had
it was an orgy
a lot of debates. So he's about as practiced as they come.
And you've seen him more than anybody.
Yes, I have. I watched all 20 of them. But to that point, he does have. There's one thing that he doesn't have on his side, which is expectations. The Romney camp for months has been saying that these were going to be the most important moment in the campaign, and that their guy was going to put on a good show. I don't think when they were saying it, they had any clue about how important it was going to be for them. If you look at the swing state polls or even the national polls, Romney's really falling behind in just about every place that he needs to make up ground. The other thing that he's really going to need to watch for in these debates is that his unfavorability rating is really high. In some cases, it's over the 50% threshold. So he's going to have to score his points against the president, but he's going to have to do so in a way that doesn't alienate people who already dislike him. And I think that's a challenge that's going to be a tightrope for him to walk when he gets on stage on Wednesday.
On the other hand, Obama really hasn't had to do anything like this in quite a while. You know, he's been pretty much debating without having an opponent. And when he talks to the press, he kind of can be a little condescending and sometimes come off as arrogant. So
yeah, no, not only is he rusty, but you got to say this isn't really his strong point. I mean, everybody talks a lot about Obama's great oratorical skills, but it's one thing to speak to thousands of people in a stadium and another to debate. And in the 2008 debates with Hillary Clinton and John McCain, he didn't embarrass himself, but this was not, you know, he didn't win because he was a great debader.
Well, but on the other hand, if he was a bad debater, he wouldn't be president to begin with. So I think the Obama people have been really brilliant about playing down expectations. Oh my God, we're so worried.
He's getting the worst reviews from his own aides already.
I know, it's really amazing.
Yeah.
But usually I don't buy this thing that the debates are dispositive. But this time, I'm convinced.
Well, this one, for sure.
If Romney does well, the story will be, is Romney beginning his recovery? And if he does poorly, it'll be the nail in the coffin.
I actually heard somebody say, some analysts say, he's got 30 seconds. Mitt Romney has 30 seconds to make an impression. It's probably a little bit of an overstatement, but you might have 30 minutes.
The answer,
but not 30 seconds. But you know, the thing is, though, that Mitt Romney, he has to actually make something happen. Barack Obama can kind of run out the clock in these debates if the polls are even half right. He doesn't have to do anything except escape. Mitt Romney's got a different job.
Right, and that's what Patrick was kind of alluding to this, that basically Romney has to figure out some way to attack Obama that doesn't look too ugly, because some of his best moments in the the Republican primary debates were actually, one of the most memorable debates was in Florida, when for the first time he went seriously on the attack against Newt Gingrich. And some of his people think that that may be a model for what he needs to accomplish this time, though I think he can't be as rough on the president as he was on Newt Gingrich.
He is at his best when he's on the attack and he's kind of controlling the tempo of the debate. And the other thing he needs to do, which he has not done consistently on the campaign trail, but when he was strong in the debate, was own his record. The times that he balks on who he is and what he stands for,
and what he's done.
Yeah, and what he's done, it becomes a real liability for him later on, and it kind of feeds into this perception of him that he's kind of squishy on a lot of things.
Yeah, and it should play to his strengths because the subject is the economy, basically, domestic issues in the economy. But it's really the economy, and maybe these guys can get to the bottom of what I think is the enduring mystery of how Barack Obama can do better and better while economic indicators do not do better and better, in fact get worse in some ways. And this week, here we are again.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You look at the consumer confidence numbers, which are not perfect and maybe misleading, but all the polls, ours and others, show people feeling better about the economy at the same time that all the economic forecasters are feeling worse about it.
Yeah, you wrote about this dichotomy this
week.
Right,
and in our little political perceptions thing on WSJ.com, and Neil King did one earlier in the week, where you have this, it's just almost unexplainable. So how can you explain the unexplainable? Well,
Go ahead.
That's what we get the big bucks
That's
for,
your
right?
job.
Here we go.
So there's a really interesting question about whether people are saying they feel better about the economy because they're Obama supporters, or whether they're backing the president because they feel the economy is getting better. I don't quite know how you tease that one out. Our colleague Neil King and some of the people at the Gallup poll think it may be more the economy is driving people to feel better, and that's leading them to be more favorable to the president. On the other hand, I think there's something to the idea that it's not only the job market that determine people's feelings about the economy, but the housing market's getting better, the stock market's up even if you don't have money in the stock market, and it becomes a kind of collective, well, things must be getting better. So
which particularly works if people want to have something to feel better about, right? So if you're looking for a sign of optimism, you look at the stock market, even if it's not doing you any good.
Right, and it's doing a lot of people good because a lot of people have money in their 401ks and shell shock. And of course, when the economy is way down here, it doesn't take much for things to seem a little bit better. But there is some unexplained divergence between the optimism that people have that the economy is going to get better in the next 6 to 12 months, and the pessimism among economists, and indeed Ben Bernanke, the Fed chairman, that it's not. And I don't know how you explain that.
There's an interesting side issue, which is that one of the things that independent and undecided voters in our poll seem to worry about more than just even the economy and jobs is the deficit, which has got Mitt Romney kind of trying to thread a needle this week, saying, I got a tax cut program, we're going to get this economy going, but oh, by the way, I'm not going to blow a hole in the side of the deficit at the same time, and that's kind of tricky to do when you're promising tax cuts and deficit reduction. He's got to square those circles at the debate, too.
When it's, to David's point, he really hung his race on the unemployment figure for a long time, and then during the primary, we started to see some signs that maybe the job market was coming back, so then he pivots to the deficit, but there's always been this fundamental issue with him, which is that they won't tell us how they're going to offset the cost of these tax cuts, and therefore it's been an open question about how serious he is about addressing the deficit. And this week, he's trying to do this kind of little dance where he says, rich people, you're going to get a tax cut, but then I'm going to take away all your tax breaks, so in the end it's going to be, but then for middle class voters, you're going to get a tax cut, and you're not going to, we're going to get rid of taxes on all your investment income to the extent that these people have investment income, and you're going to be okay. You're going to get a little bit of a boost, but that's really hard for him to do when you've owned this tax cut message for as long as he has.
I kind of wonder if an advantage for Romney of pivoting to the deficit is it might be easier for him to blame Obama for the deficit, because it's easier to say his stimulus bill, the health care bill, there's been this big run up in spending, and maybe a little bit squishier to say that he's responsible for the bad economy because he inherited a bad economy. It does get you, though, much more directly into the policy questions that there are mathematical answers to. I mean, you either reduce the deficit or you don't.
Right.
So,
I wonder if he's out of the 47% hole yet. The hole he got into with the tape, obviously now infamous, that said 47% of Americans don't pay taxes, they're not going to vote for me. Essentially, I don't care about them, I'll never get their votes there. It was probably the most single damaging thing that happened to him in the whole campaign. So I suspect he's not out of that hole yet. But do you get any sense that he is?
I don't know. I think we'll see maybe next week. And I think it was damaging, but it was really damaging because it was a confluence of so much negative news, and it was coming out of this we were told by the Romney people, these pivotal 2 weeks over the conventions where Romney was going to define himself and they were going to define Barack Obama. Well, clearly the president got the better end of that deal. He has, Romney kind of steps in it with his comments about the reaction to protests in the Middle East or in North Africa. And then this thing happens, and it really fed into every negative perception that had been fed by the Obama machine, but also that voters genuinely had about the guy. And here he is, this rich guy telling other rich people that half the country doesn't matter. And that I don't know, to the extent he gets out of it, it was always a theme in the campaign, so I don't know that he's ever going to entirely escape it. But I think in the next week, we're still seeing polls that reflect the damage done by that video release. I think next week we'll start to see it moderate a little bit, depending on how he does in the debate, and maybe it's something he can escape. But
of
it's
course,
an overarching
Barack Obama
theme.
will wear a little 47%.
Exactly. Although I don't know that he is part of the 47%.
He's certainly not.
I'm with the 47%.
Yeah. Well, I think also that the timing of that whole episode was really particularly particularly damaging for Romney because it was after the conventions when people are just starting to think that, well, maybe it's time to get off the fence, and you know, it's people are listening
and they're voting.
People
That's
are voting.
the other
Now
thing.
they're
I mean,
voting.
we've got early
right.
voting.
Yeah.